floating on the North Platte River in a horse trough. That's right, we are tanking. We're all tanking and eating chips.
I'm eating chips and my feet are in the water and it's a hot day and it feels good.
I'm gonna get in. I want to jump in.
One of the things about visiting a state is not that there is a lack of inspiration. We do so many fun things and see so many beautiful things that there's really a lot of inspiration, and so choosing just one thing for a state is always very difficult. But one thing that I noticed in Nebraska and really struck me is all the gorgeous fields, field after field we drove by. And then we saw some incredible skies. And you know, we didn't run into any tornadoes, but there's those too. But because of their weather, they just have awesome sunsets. And so this is what inspired me to paint this painting for Nebraska. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to paint stormy clouds. If you want the full tutorial, just become a Createful Art member for that. And let's get started.
Hey, welcome to my crazy setup. This is my little studio in my RV, and I'm gonna do it in here today because the weather out there is not so great. So I'm going to paint in my RV and I'm going to show you my process, and hopefully you can learn a lot from my process. Now, if you're following along, I recommend using a smaller canvas because this is going to take me a few hours and maybe even a few days. So let's get started. I like to start my paintings out with a coat of gesso, and I just mix that in with my acrylic inks, and that's going to give me the first layer on my painting. Now I'm going to put it on my palette here, and I'm going to use my roller this time because it's just a solid color. I'm not going to use my brush. I'm just going to roll it on, and then I'll take my brush and make sure I get into all the in-between places. So I will show you that. Okay, so then I take my big fat wide brush and I like to push the color into the canvas, and then I'm going to let that dry. So I'm going to be painting the sunset. I'm going to worry about that first. So I'm going to use the yellow that I have in here. So I'm going to go just below the middle mark here, and I'm adding just straight yellow, very, very saturated. So I'm just taking that yellow ink across, see how it glides so easily. And then I'm going to pull up with the yellow ink until I kind of run out of it. I'm grabbing my titanium white. I have a slightly dry brush, and I'm just pulling the white paint over. So it's going to end up not being completely white. So I'm just lightening this area and blending it in. And now I can take my orange, and that's a little bit too dark, so I grab my white and mix with my orange, and then I can blend it right there. So I'm going to pull that over, and then I'm going to go up in a curved motion with the color on my brush until the color runs out. I'm in no hurry, so I just take my time with this step. And right now you can see I'm going in a circular motion, and I'm just giving myself an idea of where I want the clouds to go. So this is helping me with the composition. You're not going to be able to see those clouds in the end. So right now I've grabbed a lighter of that orange color because it's closer to the white, and I'm just filling in some of the cloud areas. Now I'm grabbing some white, and I'm going to put some white in that yellow. And then I grabbed my orange and I'm going over that white with orange, adding that white again on the bottom. It just gives it more depth. I'm going to give myself an idea of where I want this horizon line. I just want to get an idea of the contrast between the land back there and how light I want the sky. Now I'm going to make a light pink color,
And I'm going to take that color and I'm going to put it over the clouds right there. And this is going to soften them and create some more harmony. I have a very dry brush and I'm using just a little bit of paint. So I'm going to be building this painting up with layers. So my blue, my purple, and my black from the set is going to make the dark clouds that are up here. And I just have to add some color and then add some other color. And because it's going to cover most of that yellow, I have to be kind of chunky with it and let it cover it. For the dark area, don't worry about what you're grabbing as far as how much purple or how much black or how much blue for now. Just grab something and you're going to have dark and light areas. So it goes this direction. And to get dimension in there, I just grab my white. Okay. And then once it starts getting down here, it's just going to go across. So I add a little bit of water to let it blend a little bit more. So it'll glide across here. Take off some of my paint color when I just want a little bit of color on there. When I want more control, I go down to my smaller brushes. And when I want it to be more loose and playful, then I move to my bigger brushes. So I got my smaller 1/2" brush here. And what I'm doing right now is called scumbling. So basically I'm just pushing that color across. It's very, very, very little bit of color on there. And that lets the underneath color show through. Now I'm doing a glaze. So I added more color. Now I'm spreading that color across. The difference is that the glaze has more water or medium, glazing medium on it. And the scumbling just has a little bit of paint and not a lot of water. So notice the direction that I'm pulling the paint. So this has a lot to do with where you want your clouds to go, or what direction are you seeing your clouds go in your reference photo. And also notice that I move in a roundish pattern. So I do a lot of pulling color that's still wet to other places in my painting. So I'm trying to also copy the values that I see in the clouds. And this is all with my reference photo. I'm just looking at it and seeing what colors and what shapes are down. I'm grabbing my light blue and my white now. Right now I'm just putting in some lighter sky that's going to show behind these clouds. So I'm going to be copying the shapes of that and the value as well. You can go right into that. So I'm just using a mixture of all those colors, and then I'll come over it with some peach and some other colors. So black, blue, just get it in. Then you can shape it a little bit better later. So now my brush is feeling like it's too small. So I'm going to go to my larger brush so it covers a larger area. This also helps me remain loose instead of tightening up and making every little tiny detail. A large portion of this painting is this dark cloud in the sky. So I'm going to need to get that down. Once it gets over here, it's a little bit more on the purple side. So now I'm going to take a little extra time to try to color match the colors that I'm seeing in my reference photo. So right here there's some darker blue, and the reason why it's right up there is because it's right next to that light blue, and that light blue is powerful, or shows, because of the dark next to it. And notice how I'm starting to get more purple again. So now you're going to start hearing me scrub on that canvas. This is the scumbling technique that I let you know about in my art lessons. It's a dry brush with hardly any paint, and it allows that under layer of yellow to show through. So the key is to get enough changes in here that it looks roundy, you know, like there's lots of color going on. This over here is just really this grayish color. Just adding in some of the similar colors. Blending a little bit more. So notice how the closer I am to that sunset, that yellow, the lighter I go with my paints. So I kind of gray them out with some white. And then I'm barely using any paint so that I can just soften right over there. See how I softened that area? And then I just spread some of that gray.
I'm going to start shaping around these clouds. So this right here, I put a lot of paint on, but then I have to just take a little bit off and let it blend all the way up in here. It's a little lighter.
So what I'm doing now is I'm softening the areas around that crack in the cloud.
I'm going to grab a detail brush.
So I want you to notice here how the blue, the dark blue underneath that light blue actually shows up and it makes the color darker. So see there how that happened? That is because I don't have a lot of color on my brush. And that also allows me to blend over already dry paint. So super important. Glazing is a great way to blend over already dry paint. So that's what I'm doing, is glazing here.
Now I'm just blending it in because the contrast isn't that strong. I'm taking my dirty brush over some of these places and getting in a lighter color. Now the clouds go back like this, so they're streaking back here. And you want to just have a little bit on your brush. That's how you get that look. See how the clouds are starting to form? Make little dark areas right in here. With some strong blue.
So now is the time to look at the reference photo, and I am color batching. So basically I'm putting in the blues right now, the really blue over the area of my cloud. So I have my first layer already done here. So now I'm just building up with color as I see it, and that is really important. So I'm going to go back and pick colors on my palette and mix colors and then put them on, and I'll move around my canvas a lot, you'll notice. So I'm using my 1/2 inch wide brush for this, and this still won't be the final, the very top layer, but notice how it's adding a lot more depth. You're starting to see how those clouds roll in just with that other layer on there. And it's important for me to take off paint if I'm adding too much paint over the color, because I don't want it to cover all of what's underneath it.
And right through here there's some orange. So I get that in there.
So now I'm adding the reflection of the color of the sunset onto the bottom of the clouds. Now this is going to add way more depth than what's there. It's just really tricky because you don't want to add too much color. So you will still want to see the blue underneath it. So I'm just barely adding some on and then pulling off the color off my brush if it's too much.
And get some of that along this.
I'll use like kind of a different brush strokes based on the shape of the clouds I'm looking at in my reference.
Not where the bright blue is, where that gray is. And I soften that with a little bit of color. And soften the stuff around it, and it's just barely some color. And I'm matching colors this purple that into the black. So a little orange and white will make that peach color. And then I don't just take the peach straight, I mix it with a little bit of the other colors. And then I put that in. See how strong that is? Just take off a lot of it on my brush. And I don't even need that much, that's too much. See how strong that is? So I just keep taking it off and pushing it around. Because it just needs to be a soft little amount of that peach color. And then there's a whole bunch down here of that color.
And so it's always best to start with a little bit and then add more if you need more. And then you'll really get the hang of how much to add onto your brush and when to add water, when to pull off the paint. So now I'm going to bring some of those clouds down, but I'm going to leave gaps of the yellow behind them, in between them. Alright, so I'm just going to get a little crazier with more coverage because I just realized I want the clouds to be lower, much lower. So I'm going to push them down a little bit and then I will add a little more in between with the yellow in between that. So you can decide if you want to bring yours down like I did or just keep it where it was at. If you want to paint the land portion of this painting with me, all you have to do is sign up to become a Createful Art member and you can get the hour-long tutorial that goes with this. But for this tutorial, I'm showing you how to paint a sunset. So we're going to skip over the land part and I'm going to show you the finishing of the sunset.
All right, it's a new day and we're going to continue working on this painting. The more you add in layers of detail, the more it's going to cross over to detailed. The more you just leave it like this, the more it's in an impressionistic state. And the more you just create shapes instead of details, the more impressionistic it gets. So you can kind of find your happy ground in there. In the end, make it your own, because otherwise if you don't, I mean, you can make a copy of mine, I don't really care, but if you don't make it your own, you might not be happy with it and you're not going to be able to copy me exactly. I can't even copy myself exactly. So I don't want you to be disappointed in that because it's just not possible. Because you're seeing the color underneath, I'm not getting rid of all that color. So scumbling's more of a dry brush and glazing's more of a wet brush. Scumbling's more of a pushing in, scraping, and glazing's more of a layering. So this is kind of in between what I'm doing here. Just softening those edges. And this makes all the difference in the end in my artwork because I get it to be the softness and make it look complete in this step. Whereas it's kind of rough and looks unfinished until I do this. And I don't worry about matching the colors exactly because once it dries it'll show that color underneath, it'll look like it belongs. So I'll just keep at this until I feel like I'm done. And I may do this for hours. I may do it for a few minutes. Like, it just depends on my painting and how much I feel like it needs to be fixed. So I'm not going to show you all of this. I just want you to get the idea of what I'm doing. So I hope you learned a lot from this video. If you want to learn more, go ahead and click right over here to become a Createful Art member, and you get the reference photo and everything you need to be able to paint these with me. Bonus videos, longer tutorials, lots of other fun stuff. Okay, so go ahead and become a member if that is of interest to you, and then you can watch more videos and paint along, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!